Hello, everybody. My name is Anastasia, and today I'm going to tell you why I think financial models are a great tool for product managers. The thing is that in my career, I have had to deal a lot with financial models. For example, during 2.5 years I spent on Acronis, a software backend company, I created several dozens of very different financial models. And after having such intense experience with financial models, I was quite surprised to find out that for some reason, not all product managers shared my enthusiasm for financial models. Well, come on, financial models, aren't they awesome? But no. Then I realized the reason. People aren't enthusiastic about financial models because some of them believe that financial models do not work. And by do not work, they mean that financial models' forecasts do not come true. In other words, people make some kind of forecast. 6 months later, they compare what they've got in Excel to the real situation, and the data look absolutely different. So the model didn't predict well, so the model doesn't work. So financial models are useless. Um, so when I became aware of this attitude to financial models, I understood that there seemed to be some kind of misunderstanding about what a financial model was about, why it was worth creating one, and why it could be useful anyway. So this is what I want to talk about today. Why, in my opinion, it's necessary to make financial models. What should be done to make them bring you the maximum benefit? And not just formally, but so that you learn something about your product. And in the end, I will show you another very useful method of how to estimate the risk of these financial models. So let's begin. In general, when you make financial models, they usually look like this. You have some understanding of the current situation. Here's what you think will happen in the future. And there is the money you're supposed to earn in the end. And apparently, this is where the confusion about the purpose of financial models starts. It seems that it is so important for people to understand how much money they will earn that they think that the purpose of a financial model is to estimate this amount of money. But in fact, it's absolutely not like that. The point of a financial model is not to get this wretched figure, and even not in what formulas you put into Excel and what logic you will use in the model. The point of a financial model is in the time you spend on it. Because if you don't do it formally, but conscientiously and properly, then you will greatly improve your product knowledge. Because you will learn more about your users, your data, what interactions there are between your users and data, and what the possible scenarios for the future are, and lots of other things. This new advanced understanding of what you know about your product, your users, and what can happen to them, that's the real value you get, and not just a revenue prediction that either comes true or not. Well, as a matter of fact, this prediction most likely will not come true. And here is an example from my life of how I understood what financial models were really about. I just came to work in Acronis and got into a project where, together with my colleague, we were busy assessing the monetary value of Acronis as a business during several months. We finished the project, presented it to the management, everything was great, end of project. Then, just out of curiosity, I decided to calculate what the cost of storing 1 GB in different data centers was. The thing is that Acronis has lots of data centers all over the world. And it turned out that storing 1 GB in Japan is not like storing 1 GB somewhere in Europe. And I'm not sure how it happened, but I was the first to discover it. Well, okay, suppose the cost is different. So what? But after I have done calculations using this new info for one of our most important products, it turned out that over time, the money we would get from our customers might not cover anymore the cost of storing their data. And that was a real surprise because the product was great, everyone loved it, it was profitable, so there was just no reason to worry. Or at least we thought so. So when we realized that huge risk, we simply changed the pricing completely and lived happily ever after. And this is what financial models are about. Financial models are not about getting one figure and thinking that it is all over. Just as in my example, if I had stopped thinking about the model the moment I've cut a valuation of Acronis monetary value, I would have never discovered the risk of one of the products becoming unprofitable. So you get some numbers, then you get some more numbers, and then you try to understand how you can use these numbers to improve something about your business or your product. And to be able to do so, you need to ask yourselves lots of questions, and many of them might be really uncomfortable. What kind of questions? That is what I'm going to speak about right now. Actually, questions emerge even before you start developing a financial models, because each financial model requires some data. But not every company has this data, and the quality of this data is not always good. If you are lucky and you've got the data, the question you should ask yourself is, are my data okay? And if you're not lucky, your question should be, where the hell am I going to get the data? If you're unlucky and you don't have the data, the only thing I can advise you is to make friends with those who can provide you with this data. I'm absolutely serious. This might be one of the most important things in the whole presentation. You need to find a way to get along with these people and to learn how to explain them that you do need the data, that you need them right now and in this particular format, and not in a month's time, but today. Okay, if today is absolutely impossible, let it be tomorrow at the latest. Be sure to acquire this skill because it's super useful. If you are lucky and you have the data, you need to check that they are adequate. What is the right way to deal with the data is a big topic from the area of analytics, so I will not go into details. But in general, you need at least to make sure that you don't have any recording errors, that you 100% understand where the data come from, who provided them, and, especially important, that you know the particular meaning of each of the metrics. Because sometimes what you think the metric means is absolutely not the same thing that was meant by someone who created that metric. For example, in Acronis, we had a simple metric, the archive size, measured in gigabytes. What can be easier? Gigabytes are always gigabytes, right? But it turned out that this metric can mean three different things. And if one used it without knowing its meaning in a particular file, then one would get incorrect calculations and hence make wrong conclusions and a wrong decision. Okay, suppose you are that lucky to have a dedicated person, like an analyst, who deals with all the data and financial models. Then you just remember that if it's you to make a decision later, then you will be responsible for it, despite all the analysts in the world. That's why I always advise understanding as well as possible what your analyst is doing and to know why he or she is doing it this way, and where the data come from, and what the metrics are, and why this model is used and not another one. This is all just to be on the safe side and to keep eye on what's going on. Again, after all, it is your product and your responsibility. Okay, you've got the data. What's next? The first thing you need to understand is what and why you need to include in the model, or what and why not. I'm speaking about this part where you write down all the assumptions and try to understand what affects them. During this stage, you are supposed to understand whether you have included in the model everything you had to. If you have decided not to include something, you also need to understand why you have decided not to do so. That is why you think this parameter has no influence and how you can test it. It's an output. You should get a list of assumptions guaranteeing you that you both haven't missed anything and that each of the items is here for a reason. After you have finished with assumptions, you start to look at the numbers you have written in front of each assumption. I mean this part. Let's say you've got an app and every month you have 1,500 new users, converting to paying users with 15% probability. And that you have an average paycheck of a certain amount and that users consume that amount of your resources. So you look at these numbers and ask yourself, first of all, why do I think I will get 1,500 users each month and not 1,400 or 1,600? Secondly, where will these users come from? I mean, they don't come out of nowhere, right? Okay, let's assume the marketing team will bring them. But are you sure marketing can guarantee this number of users each month? And are you sure you haven't forgotten to include marketing expenses into your model? Next, what is the difference between users who pay you $15 and users who pay you $50? And what affects the conversion and the average paycheck? All of this you need to understand here to make sure that you really see into this and you know what values your parameters can have and what these values depend on and when they can appear and how likely it is. After you have sorted out your assumptions, it's time to finally have a look at the money. So suppose you take your model, do the calculations, and get the output that you will earn that much money. But as I told you, money is by far not the most important thing in the model. It is much more important what is money is affected by. So during this stage, you're supposed to understand what influences your profit the most, meaning that you need to find variables that make the most influence. Usually these variables are pretty obvious, like the more customers, the more money, like thanks, Captain. But actually sometimes there are variables, absolutely indiscernible. But if you change the input value by 1 or 2%, your profit will start to jump by 10 or 30%. And that is the kind of variables you need to find as well. Usually I do this by using sensitivity analysis. Believe it or not, but Excel has a built-in tool for that called data table. So how does it work? You take two of your variables. Let it be new users monthly and resource consumption, and look at how different values of these variables impact the profit. So if you have a lot of users and they have a low consumption rate, then obviously everything gonna be great. If you have just a few paying users, but their consumption is high, obviously you've got a problem. And also there are some intermediate variants. So you look at this table and try to work out what variance is most likely to come true. What will happen if you have more or fewer users? What your risk is, that is in money, what you may lose and what not. Another useful thing you can do is the initial values analysis. And again, you can do it with the built-in Excel tool, Data Solver. What is it about? You need to estimate whether you will at least not get in the negatives. And this tool helps you to calculate how many, say, new users you need to acquire each month for unit economics to work at all. And if by using this tool you discover that you need 2,000 new users each month, but the marketing team can bring you only 1,500, then you need to figure out where you will get another 500 users for your model to converge. So you check every input variable in this way, one by one, and try to understand what value it shall have for you not to get in the negatives. Actually, I always advise modeling at least three scenarios: pessimistic, optimistic, and neutral. The pessimistic scenario assumes that everything will go wrong. You will have few users who will nearly ever pay you, but consume lots of resources. The optimistic scenario means that everything will be just perfect. Lots of users who will pay you lots of money and have almost zero consumption. And the neutral scenario is something in between. Why do that? Because if you are looking at the optimistic scenario and see that even in this perfect case you don't earn any money, you understand that you have food for thought before you start the project. On the other hand, if you see that you still earn some money even in the pessimistic scenario, when everything goes wrong, you understand that the project is actually not that bad. But there is a problem with this approach, just as with sensitivity analysis and initial values analysis. What problem? You can understand that you might earn the money, you might lose the money, but you don't know what the probability to earn and lose the money is. Sure, statement I can either lose $1,100 or earn $1,100 is absolutely not the same as with 99% probability I lose $50,000 and with 1% probability I earn $100,000. Is it? So the problem is that we don't know this probability. And that's why the next question you should find an answer to is, what are your chances to get profitable at all? And here is when Monte Carlo methods might help you. Monte Carlo method is a scientific modulation method, and it literally answers you what the probability for you to earn more than a given amount of money is. Here, for example, you can really see that with 16% probability, these guys will earn more than $700,000. And you can do just the same with your model. Why does it work? The probability is usually calculated as the number of desired outcomes divided by the number of all possible outcomes. But the problem with financial models is that you have so many variables and they may have so many values that it's just impossible to estimate in the mind how many possible outcomes there are and how many of them will bring you some money and how many will not. You can't do it by yourself, but the computer and the Oracle Crystal Ball software can. The software costs about $1,000, which is literally nothing in comparison to other corporate software. And this software is really going to calculate all of this automatically for you. How does the algorithm work? Firstly, you take your input variables, which are now point estimations, and substitute them with ranges. Actually, you are not that sure that you get exactly 1,500 users and not 1,502 or 1,486 users. More likely, it's some kind of range, like I will get between 500 and 5,000 users, but most likely I will get 1,500 users. So you provide this range as an input to the software and do the same for each of the variables. As a next step, the software runs your financial model 10,000 times, or as many times as you want it to. During every launch, it changes the input values. So during the first launch, it says you'll have 1,500 users, 50 conversion rate, and so on. During the next launch, it will be 1,550 users, then 10,000 users. And just like this, it will change all the variables, and for every launch, it will calculate how much money you're going to earn 10,000 times. It will really look through 10,000 possible scenarios of what is going to happen to your product and count in how many of these 10,000 scenarios you are profitable, and thus calculate the probability. Let's say you will be profitable in 8,000 of these 10,000 scenarios. Then the probability to become profitable is 80%. This kind of models helps to transform statements like there are changes I will earn $100,000 and there are changes I will not, to statements like with 60% probability I will earn $100,000 or more, and with 15% probability I will lose $100,000 or more. And it seems like a huge difference between these two statements. Let me share another example from my life. As I worked in Acronis, we launched a new product with quite a risky pricing strategy. But this pricing was strategically very important. I was responsible for the pricing, and I kind of made sure that it was developed properly and that we would not get into the negatives. But I wanted to be really sure that everything would be okay and that the risk of losing money was not high. So I started to investigate different approaches and ended up learning about the Monte Carlo method. As I applied it to my model, I saw that there was a 30% risk to become unprofitable. 30%. And that was despite the fact that I had checked the model before and everything had seemed to be okay. But of course, it didn't mean that we immediately rushed to change the pricing. Some of the decisions you make are not based on analytics or financial models, but on other things like strategy. And that was exactly the case. So we made some small changes to the pricing to decrease the probability of losing the money. But apart from it, I found out that there was a variable, of that indiscernible kind I mentioned before. And it had a huge impact on our profitability. Although neither I nor my colleagues had thought about it. It became clear that we needed to keep an eye on that parameter, and if it went below the threshold, we would need to urge the marketing and all other teams to bring it back to a safe zone. And now we finally come to the last question, which is actually the most important one. So what? And by so what, I mean, and so what you're going to do with the new knowledge you acquired while creating a financial model. Because developing a financial model just formally isn't that cool. You'll waste lots of time without getting much insights. It would be much more efficient to keep asking yourself, so what if there is a difference in gigabyte cost across data centers? Or so what if we can lose this money? Or even so what if we can earn that much money? What are you going to do with it? I learned to ask this question to myself after I had made my very first financial model. I came to my boss, super proud of myself. I had been working on it for 3 days around the clock. So I showed it to him, and he looked at it for 20 seconds and said, so what? And I said, what do you mean, so what? I've been working, looking at the data and blah, 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 and good work, profit, all the things. And he actually, no, you should think about what we are going to do with the product. So we sat down, thought for a while, and then decided to change the pricing I was talking about at the very beginning of the presentation. Well, that's it. Here's my short summary. Financial models are not about numbers, but about processes. If you don't have the data, make friends with the developers. If you do have the data, make friends with the developers anyway. Try using Monte Carlo method, sensitivity, and initial variable analysis. And ask yourself the question, so what, as often as possible. That's it. Thank you.